We are presented by WinBet. Betting is a team sport. Bet together at WinBet. Eric Allen here at the Indianapolis Scouting Combine with NFL's network, NFL.com's Bucky Brooks. This is your time of year. I looked at your latest mock draft. You have the New York Jets at number 4 overall, taking Ike Ekwonu out of NC State. What do Jets fans have to know about the big lineman?
Look, Ike Ekwonu is a guy that when you watch him on tape, he is a mauler brawler type at the offensive line, meaning he absolutely mauls and destroys guys on the edges. He's a very natural athlete. He's a very, I would say, explosive space player. Now, when he finishes guy with aggression and violence and all of those things. I would say very similar to Mekhi Becton in terms of he's not necessarily technically refined, but what he is a specimen on the edges. And depending upon what you have in terms of coach, man, you talk about a guy who can be a very, very dominant player for a long time on the edge.
Do you view him more as a tackle on the pro level more than guard?
Yeah, I think he's a tackle. And I think as you're building it out, I think if you put him on the right side to go with Becton on the left, I think you have the opportunity to solidify your edges and not only solidify it, but have more attitude at the point of attack. This is a game where we're seeing when teams are able to kind of impose their will, they are able to dictate the terms. And so in the running game, based on how the Jets ideally want to play, I think this guy can move well enough to do all those things.
Do you think once we get to draft weekend, it's going to end up being in some kind of order? Evan Neal from Alabama and Aiden Hutchinson 1-2?
Potentially, but I think the main thing is like no one really knows, like with the Jags, like where they're going to go in terms of are they going to go with the pass rusher? Are they going to go with the offensive tackle? And then with the offensive tackle class, the interesting part of that is those guys may be mixed up a little bit because as much as I talk about Evan Neal and then we talk about Ike, there's a lot of love for like Charles Cross and what Cross can bring because he's probably a more natural and maybe a pure offensive tackle that is great in pass protection.
What about at number 10 overall in your latest mock? You have the Jets going receiver with Garrett Wilson at Ohio State. How do you separate the top of this group at the receiver position?
A lot of it is like going to the ice cream shop and determining what flavor do you like? What do you want at that position? Do you want a big physical guy? Because when you think about the receivers that could have that'd be a Drake London, a Treylon Burks. Do you want a natural route runner? That takes you into the category of where you get to Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and David Bell and Jahan Dotson and those guys. And so it really depends on being able to identify what it is that you feel like you need and who fits that criteria. But it's not just, hey, we can just rank them from 1 to 10 and say, hey, these guys universally throughout the league will be the top 10 receivers. It's a little bit of a hodgepodge because it's a nuanced situation.
Interesting words from Robert Saleh today. He talked about premium positions at the top of the draft where you're typically talking about quarterback, cornerback, edge rusher. But he said you don't rule out positions. And he mentioned the word unicorns. If there is a guy at a certain position, say like a safety, who is so much better, is the best player on your board, you certainly consider that.
Yeah, you can't consider that. So I'm thinking you're probably referencing Kyle Hamilton in this year's draft. I think the thing about Kyle Hamilton, when we think about what he brings to the table, he's an outstanding safety. I think he's more of a pure center field safety than, let's just say, like Jamal Adams, who was taken at the top of the board. Jamal was a guy that was a bit of a unicorn in terms of his ability to play down in the box. He could blitz off the edge. He could play the run. Might not be necessarily the playmaker against the passing game. Kyle Hamilton is more of a passing game playmaker, a guy who has outstanding instincts and awareness, more of a center fielder. Yes, he can drop down in box and he can make plays and those things, not the blitzer that Jamal was. So depending upon how you're building your defense out, he certainly can be a very valuable commodity for the Jets as a center fielder player.
Bucky, where is the depth best when we get to the second round? Because the Jets are in such a unique position with the 4 picks in the top 38 here.
Man, so it's really like you talk about the marquee positions except quarterback. So if you think about International Football League, you normally build your team around like passers, pass rushers, playmakers. So you have plenty of pass rushers in this draft. Like this draft is deep and loaded with those guys. You have plenty of pass protectors in terms of your offensive tackles. We've talked about some of those guys at the top. You have plenty of playmakers in terms of being able to catch the ball and make it happen at wide receiver and even at tight end.
Mm.
And so you think about those first 2 rounds. If I'm the Jets, ideally you want to fix the offensive line. You want to get another weapon on the perimeter, and then you want to find, hey, who are the impact players that can come and give us a jolt, offensively or defensively.
Do you think teams are going to be calling Joe Douglas interested in getting up more so probably at that 10 slot than 4?
I mean, I think there'll be some interest. A lot of it, though, a lot of times the trades are driven by the quarterback,
Yeah.
and I don't know if there's that much intrigue about the quarterback. People will talk about Kenny Pickett, people will talk about Malik Willis and those guys, but how much interest is there in getting a quarterback? How many people are clamoring to get those guys? The trade market is driven by someone trying to move up to get their franchise guy, not typically the other way around. So I think he'll get some phone calls. I don't know how frantic or how crazy it will be in terms of people trying to move up to those spots.
What did you make Zach Wilson last year, the number 2 overall selection in the draft? Had some tough moments early, finished the year 5 consecutive games without an interception. So he started protecting the football. And we saw the spurts and athleticism and he making those plays off script. But I also thought he got better in the pocket.
Yeah, I mean, I think he got better. I think what happens now is we're in such a microwave evaluation mode when it comes to the quarterbacks that we don't really give them a full chance to kind of figure out the game. The NFL game is hard, and it's hard for quarterbacks. A lot of moving pieces. You got pass rush coming at you. You got to set the protections and stuff depending on where you anticipate the blitz coming from. Then after the snap, the blitz comes from a different place and they're moving. I think Zach Wilson had what most rookies have, some ups and downs, but I felt like at the end of the year, you begin to see him settle in because the game slowed down and he started to make more plays. And if you're the Jets, you hope that you can put him in a situation where he doesn't have to do a whole lot of thinking. It's very clean and defined for him. And then you can see him play into his arm talent.
What do you think of that 2021 draft class overall? You can go both sides of the ball, but since we're talking about offense, Joe Douglas moves up from 23 to 14. He gets Elijah Vera Tucker, who looks like a Pro Bowl, all-pro type player. He gets Elijah Moore at the top of the 2nd round. Then comes back in the 4th round, gets Michael Carter, ends up leading the Jets in rushing.
I mean, it's been a solid class, and I think the returns have been really, really, really impressive thus far. I think when you look at how they want to build this team offensively, they tried. Elijah Moore is a guy who's a very talented pass catcher. To see him back in the mix for a full season should help Zach Wilson get comfortable. Michael Carter flashed, had some success on the ground and as a pass catcher. So that gives him a chance. And then Elijah Vera Tucker quietly had an outstanding season, can dominate on the inside in the trenches. And so when I think about this team and I think about their ability to take the next step, is about those guys maturing and then adding a couple blue chip pieces around them.
What do you think of the tight end position in this class? People talking about the depth. We saw Trey McBride work with the Jets staff down in Mobile, Alabama at the Senior Bowl. Another kid who actually played on the American squad, of course, Isaiah Likely.
Yeah, no, the tight end class is really solid. I would say not necessarily 1st round down solid, but 2nd, 3rd round, a lot of quality pass catchers and playmakers. The middle of the field is so important for a young quarterback is because it's the easiest throw. And if you can throw it right down the middle, it just changes the game. It makes people back in there, so then you get more one-on-one out the outside. You talked about it, like there are plenty of pass catchers that can make it happen. But if I'm the Jets and I'm thinking down the line, keep an eye on Jelani Woods from UVA. He's a big physical kid, really dominated the East-West Shrine game. He could be one that kind of draws surprising interest.
I like that. That could be a diamond in the rough down the line. He's a real long kid, isn't he?
Yeah, he's super long.
Yeah.
I mean, like super long, very athletic, just really expands the strike zone. And so for a young quarterback, you want guys that can expand the strike zone because it allows them to play and play well being imperfect. So that gives them a chance.
What's a good scenario for the Jets entering day 2 of the draft? We'll see how the board falls. But just looking at it, what you know, how much study you've done here with those picks early on in day 2.
One, you can't miss on the picks. You just have to hit doubles.
Yeah.
Can't get caught up in trying to hit a home run because then you might strike out. So what you want are some solid character guys that have good talent that you can put on the field and you can trust that they're going to be reliably available to compete. I just believe you have to make it a priority to upgrade the things around the quarterback.
Yeah.
So getting a real legitimate number 1. Not someone that's like, oh, we'll elevate him. He was number 2, but he's really number 1. Like, no, a legitimate guy that looks like he can be a number 1. I think you have to worry about that. You also have to worry, can you find someone at tight end that can not only be a standout block in the run game, but can also be a legitimate threat down the middle? As you're morphing into this run-based team that wants to do all of this zone run action and this, you got to be able to have counters, bootlegs, and those things. So to me, those are the things that you have to keep an eye on.
And lastly, I just wanted to ask you about the defensive side of the ball. Jets hoping they get Carl Lawson back healthy. I mean, he was the best player on the field last summer before going down with the Achilles injury, and he changed the dynamic off the edge. But obviously, they got to make a lot of improvements there. As far as draft is concerned, who are you looking at if you're the Jets? Who are you taking a long look at? Because I know you want to add those pieces around Wilson, but on the other side of the ball.
On the other side of the ball, I mean, I think you got to continue to look to add pass rushers because you have to have someone. You want Carl Lawson to come back, and you hope that his recovery is on track and he's able to, kind of be the guy that you expect him to be, but you need to have somebody else in place. You got to have multiple pass rushers to be able to win the game consistently in the National Football League. So I'm really trying to attack that area. And if I can't, and there's so many blended guys because you 4-3 team, 3-4 team, and those things, but you got to walk away with a pass rusher or 2 in this draft haul.
And your favorite 3? Right now.
So my favorite 3 right now, Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeau, and then I have George Karlaftis. Karlaftis from Purdue as a kid is very productive, high motor, high energy kid. He's going to be there. At Thibodeau, he's a very talented freak athlete coming off the edge, can bend and burst. And then Aiden Hutchinson is a mix of that freak athlete with a technically sound player. They're graded closely, but ultimately, man, it'll come down to walking you through these guys and understanding exactly who they are to make sure they're good fits.
Bucky, very gracious with your time. You're making the rounds here at the Combine. We appreciate it as always.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
WynnBET is now live in New Jersey, and they're bringing the excitement of Wynn Las Vegas to online sports betting. Get in on all your favorite teams, players, and sports, from boosted parlays to live in-game odds on every major sport. They have what you need to win. Sign up today to receive a special offer, risk-free $500 sports bet. Download the WynnBET app now or visit wynnbet.com to start winning. WynnBET, an official sportsbook and gaming partner of the New York Jets. Offer subject to change. Terms and conditions at wynnbet.com. Must be 21 or older and present in New Jersey. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-270-7117.
We're presented by WynnBET. Betting is a team sport, but together WynnBET. Eric Allen joined here at the Indianapolis NFL Scouting Combine by former Jets beat writer Judy Batista, who is dressed for the occasion. Thank you for wearing green today.
I know. I feel like I should have color appropriate blazers for all the teams, but only the Jets.
So NFL Network doesn't mind that you wearing green out there?
No, they didn't mention it. It's only when I get around Jets people that they're like, "Hey, you got a green jacket?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah."
How good does it feel to be back to? I don't want to say normal. We're still living amidst the pandemic, but we're all together here at the Scouting Combine again.
So much better. Yes, virtual Combine last year was just brutal, and I mean, it's great to see people. You get to talk to people again, and it'll be good to get to see the prospects in person too. So it's great.
So one of the things that I like to do annually is visit with you at the NFL's owners meetings. That is happening next month. Well, I guess we are in March. So later this
few
month,
weeks,
down in Florida. What's on tap in terms of rule proposals and maybe some changes?
So I think the big one that everybody's really interested in is overtime, whether they're going to change overtime after, we saw some overtime games in the playoffs that were thrilling, but maybe weren't fully satisfying to some people. So I think that's a big conversation, whether you change overtime to guarantee each team a possession. There is a proposal from the Indianapolis Colts to change overtime. That would be for the regular season and the postseason.
Okay.
Right now, it's hard to get a read on how where the sentiment is. I think there's really mixed feelings about changing overtime. I'm not sure there's any sentiment for changing it during the regular season at all, because it's a pretty even split statistically. Like if you win the coin flip in the regular season, you're not necessarily going to win the game.
Right.
And the argument for changing it in the postseason is that you almost always have the best quarterbacks playing in the postseason, and so if the Packers win the coin flip and you put the ball in Aaron Rodgers' hands, he's probably going to lead you to a touchdown and the game's going to be over. And that's what we saw. We saw Patrick Mahomes do that to the Bills. I do think what has lowered the temperature on this conversation is what happened the week after that when the Chiefs won the coin toss in the AFC Championship game and the Bengals stopped them and they got the ball and then Joe Burrow went down and won the game. So I think if the Chiefs had won the coin flip and won that game, won the conference championship game, done it 2 weeks in a row, I think the conversation would have been over and like overtime would be getting changed.
Where do you stand on this issue? What do you think?
I have mixed feelings. Like I like the sudden death feel, and I feel like you've just played a 60-minute game. Like at any point you could stop. I mean, the Bills Chiefs game was one of the great games we've ever seen, right? I mean, it was just dazzling quarterback play, but all the Bills had to do was hold for 13 seconds and you're not going to overtime.
Right.
They're winning the game in regulation. And then of course you could play defense in overtime. I know the defenses are exhausted, but I feel, to me, there's a part of me that feels like if you guarantee the each offenses touch the ball, you're sort of minimizing the importance of the defense, and I don't think you should be doing that.
I totally agree with
Yeah.
that. I
We'll
don't
see.
understand. I feel like this happens every couple of years.
Yes.
What we saw the Chiefs play the Patriots in the AFC Championship game
Same thing,
not
right?
too long ago.
Right.
Patriots get the ball,
Right.
they
Tom Brady
win.
goes
We
down
don't
the
see
field.
Mahomes out there.
Right.
So this time the Chiefs win the coin toss. Obviously, Mahomes keeps Josh Allen on the bench. I don't know. What
Right.
do you feel like we're more likely to have a change that is playoff only, or do you think the rule
do.
is going to be regular season and playoff?
The owners I've talked to who are at least thinking about voting in favor of a change to overtime are thinking about it only for postseason, for just that reason. That, like, do you want the season decided by by the coin flip, right? They don't want to change it for regular season because the regular season is much more evenly divided.
Right.
But it's hard to get a read on how they feel generally. Like I'm not sure there's a ton of enthusiasm right now. I think a big part of it is going to be what kind of proposal emerges from the competition committee. Does the competition committee put its weight behind it? Like, did they say we really think we should change overtime? I'm not sure about that.
So does this happen if Bills, Chiefs, and Chiefs, not Chiefs, Browns, Chiefs, Bengals, excuse me, don't happen in consecutive weeks?
I don't think so.
No?
This comes up every few years, overtime. Like, teams make proposals about changing overtime all the time and it sort of dies on the vine. I don't think there would really be a serious conversation if we just didn't see these two tremendous playoff games decided in overtime. And like I said, I think if the AFC Championship game had been won by the Chiefs, without Joe Burrow ever touching the ball, then I think you really would have seen
Right.
a push. But I don't know. It was brought to my attention that some of the coaches who are on the competition committee now are defensive coaches, Mike Vrabel, Mike Tomlin, and their feeling, I'm sure, is going to be like, hey, play defense. Like,
Yeah.
you shouldn't discount defense this much. So we'll see. And even if the competition committee endorses a rule change, getting 24 votes for anything in the NFL is hard. Like, you can't
24 out of 32 you're
getting
talking about.
24 owners to agree on like what day of the week it is difficult.
Right.
So like, it's a high bar to clear to change a rule.
Player safety. We've seen some changes over the years. Special teams obviously having a direct impact. Do you think that could continue here?
Yeah, the punt is going to be looked at and I think is going to be changed in some probably fairly significant way because their own injury data shows a disproportionate number of concussions happening on the punt. So once you hear that data, some change is coming. 4 years ago, this happened with kickoffs. Same thing,
Right.
Disproportionate number of concussions, and they changed the kickoff rules, right? They incentivized basically not returning the kickoff, right? It's trickier on punts, right? I mean,
Because what are you actually going to change?
what are you going to change? So the idea, they don't have the answer, by the way. The league office doesn't know what to do either. So they are going to bring special teams coaches together during the off season and basically say, like, we need to come up with something. Like, we've got to, figure out how to do this. They do not want to eliminate the punt from the game. They don't want to eliminate kicking from the game. but they've got to figure out a way to make it safer. 'cause you
Yeah,
just can't have it.
anytime you talk about player safety,
Yeah.
anytime you talk about limiting concussions,
It's going to happen.
it's going to
Something's
happen.
Gonna, like this, they cannot go into next season without making a change.
We talked about the playoffs a little bit in regards to overtime. What did you make of the playoffs and the changing landscape of the National Football League? Because I feel like a little bit the old adage in the NBA was everybody's going to make a run. It's going to be a close game at the end, where the NFL playoffs, every game we were watching was coming down to the last
Bonkers.
3 or 4 minutes.
Every game. There were games, so I was on the road covering games, and then I'd be in the hotel watching other games, and like I'd be in the hotel room by myself screaming at the television. Like I happened to be back in the room for the Chiefs Bills game, and like I was literally standing in front of the television in the hotel room, like screaming. It was bananas. They were amazing. I mean, you should only be so lucky to have playoff games like that happen every year. And I also thought it really showed. I mean, the AFC could not be more loaded at quarterback. I like it's got to be terrifying. If you don't think you have a quarterback, like you better go find a quarterback because you have no shot in the AFC if you don't have the guy now because they're loaded. It's remarkable.
Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes,
Right.
Josh Allen,
Justin Herbert, who wasn't even in the mix.
Yeah, didn't even play in the postseason.
Lamar.
Yep.
Who
was banged up. You would have figured that they're going to be back.
Right. So I mean, there are so many good quarterbacks in the AFC. Mostly watching that, Aaron Rodgers, like you just watch these guys and you think like, man, if you don't have a quarterback, holy cow.
WynnBET is now live in New Jersey, and they're bringing the excitement of Wynn Las Vegas to online sports betting. Get in on all your favorite teams, players, and sports, from boosted parlays to live in-game odds on every major sport. They have what you need to win. Sign up today to receive a special offer, risk-free $1,000 sports bet. Download the WynnBET app now or visit wynnbet.com to start winning. WynnBET, an official sportsbook and gaming partner of the New York Jets. Offer subject to change. Terms and conditions at wynnbet.com. Must be 21 or older and present in New Jersey. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-270-7117.
You work for the NFL station. You work for NFL Network. What does that say about the parity in this league? It really feels like if you do have that position covered, and we do, or it seems like we're living in an age where there are a lot of good young quarterbacks, then your team's going to have a chance.
Well, I mean, to me, the Bengals are like the greatest. Like, if the league wants to give every team hope, like you just point to the Cincinnati Bengals, right? A team that now they had playoff seasons when Marvin Lewis was the head coach, but I mean, they were scuffling there for a long time, and then they get the #1 pick, and it just so happens that Joe Burrow is there that year, and I mean, like, whoa, right? Like, and then you draft Jamar Chase, and you spend a little money in free agency to build up your defense, and boom, you're in the Super Bowl. And I mean, I'm not saying everybody's going to be able to do that because I think Joe Burrow is probably a pretty rare dude.
Oh yeah,
but that to me gives hope to.
What did you think of his wardrobe ensemble on
Loved it.
Super Bowl?
I think
day.
We need more personality in the NFL. I love that. I love that he's got a bit of an edge and a personality, and like the wardrobe is great. I love the sunglasses. I love the whole thing. He's tremendous fun.
So you're speaking right to the Jets fans right there, Judy, when you're saying, hey, the Cincinnati Bengals go from 2 to 4, and then obviously they're playing in the Super Bowl. Listen, the Jets went from 2 wins to 4 wins in Robert Saleh's first season. I think Jets fans, rightfully so, are thinking, hey, we got to make a jump this year. And I'm not saying they got to play in the Super Bowl, nor does anybody at home. But what do you think of the guy slinging the rock for the Jets now? Another young quarterback. Had some bumps along the way. We expected that. Seemed to settle down the stretch. Very talented. Make plays inside, outside the pocket, off script. He's got some electricity to his game. What do you think of Zach Wilson?
I liked him. I especially like you said, down the stretch where I thought, first of all, I thought he showed some toughness, and I think that's important. You're going to take lumps in the NFL, even if you're on a really, really good team that's winning playoff games.
Yep.
Like, there are going to be bumps every year. There were bumps for Tom Brady every year. You have to be able to sustain them, and I thought he's a little bit of a tough guy, and that's good. Like what the Bengals did, like you've got to put, like, no matter how good a quarterback is, like you got to put pieces around him, a lot of pieces around him, right? And so I think that's the next step for the Jets, right? Is can you can you protect him?
Yep.
Most importantly, can you protect him? That's number one. And then can you put enough weapons around him? Can you build up the defense so that it's not all going to be on the quarterback every week? Because that's a big load for any quarterback to handle. But I think he's got a little bit of the it factor. You just have to see if he can do it week in and week out, and that's tough. And look, the Joe Burrow you saw at the end of the season was not the Joe Burrow who was playing early in the season, and he said it himself. He was coming off a knee injury. He was not moving the same way. Right? Players develop. And I think, I think we knew Zach Wilson was a young quarterback that had to be formed a little bit. And so now we'll see if he makes the big jump in the second year. But again, I think if they put pieces around him, I think the team can make a jump.
How unique is this landscape for a young quarterback? A kid who came out after his junior year at
Right.
BYU, you covered this team. New York is
Different.
it is totally
It's
different.
different than anything.
And this fan base, I get back to them all the time, but rightfully so. It's been 11 years since this team's made the postseason. So
Yes.
pressure, you
Right.
got it.
Right. Yes, there's no question. I mean, it's tough, and it would be tough for anybody. I think it's a tough landscape. Like, listen, Mark Sanchez, when he came to the Jets, right now he went to a big school in a
Yes.
huge media market. He was used to media attention. It's tough. It's tough for everybody. But I think I think Zach handled that element of it well. Like, I think he is smart enough to know what it is, and he maybe is young enough. He's doesn't know what he doesn't know,
Right.
and that's good.
It's also huge, don't you think, that he's really going to have a true off season? You're talking
Yes.
about a kid who come out of school last year and then has to prepare for the draft and do the pro days and go through that whole process before you're coming in there learning a new system. And now you have your feet underneath you.
And he was also learning a new system with a brand new head coach.
Yes.
And that's different too. Like, head coaches will tell you that they learn stuff after I can remember Herm Edwards when he was at the Jets saying, like, when you're a rookie head coach, like, you can't imagine all the stuff that crosses your desk. And so I think everybody will feel more relaxed and more familiar. It'll be a normal off season. You won't have COVID stuff. You'll have a normal altogether off season.
Right.
And I think that helps everybody.
What's your thoughts on Robert Saleh? You just talked about a new head coach, first year. He's talking about building a culture. Players really gravitate towards
Yeah.
him. There's, sometimes people come in and they say, "Hey, we're trying to create a new culture." Like, this guy has it in terms of his reach to the players.
I agree. I mean, look, obviously I'm not in the locker room with him, but I mean, I like him. I think he's likable, and I think he's the kind of guy you gravitate to. Like, I think even media, like, right, you go to somebody like that. Look, he's a first-time head coach, and I think we will see a much different kind of coach. I think he'll be different in game management, in-game management. I think they just learned so much after that first year. No matter how prepared they think they are to become a head coach, like, it's always more overwhelming than they could ever have imagined. And so now I think he'll be a better head coach in year 2.
Do you think the timeline should really be? This is really Joe Douglas, Robert Saleh together,
Right.
year 2,
Yeah.
because this
Of
is
course.
Joe Douglas's third draft. But he
Yeah, but-
comes in, he gets hired. He
It
gets
was
hired in
strange.
June.
Yes, it was
Yeah.
strange, right.
He's got a
Strange
different
timeline.
coach at the time.
Of course, yeah, much different. I mean, you can't wipe that year
No,
away,
no.
but that was a strange period. He came in late.
Yes.
He had a coach that he hadn't hired. Now these two are together. I think this is where you start to see, right? Hopefully they have the mind meld that they
Yes.
know exactly what they like together. And again, I think if they feel confident that they've got the right guy at quarterback, now you see them start to build, and they've got tons of capital to do it with. So now you start to put the pieces around. And I'm not saying they're going to make a Cinderella like run to the Super
No,
Bowl, but
of course
I
not.
do think you can, you sort of see the building
You
process.
have the flexibility and you have the
Mhm.
capital. We're talking about under 50 million under the cap right now, right around there. That's the estimation. Now, if you keep the number 4 and number 10 overall selections, you probably
Right.
take about 10 or 11 million off of that starting.
Right.
But with that being said, you still can resign some of your 18 unrestricted free agents who have contracts expiring in March. And you can be players in free agency, although I would assume the Jets at this point where they're at
Right.
is you're
Right.
looking for value.
Value, right.
Yes.
I think you're looking for value. And I also think are you looking to make the splash signing? Probably not. You're looking to make like smart, like, the meat and potatoes of your roster kinds of signings, right? Like you need linemen. Like I'm not talking about like you're not going to go after like, if Devontae Adams ever hit the open market, which I don't think he is. I don't think there's any chance that would ever happen, but like you're probably not going to make that kind of signing, but you're going to go make that sort of guts of the roster kinds of signings. Those guys that those are the right, the blue collar guys
Yeah.
who really make your team.
How about New York being the epicenter of the 2022
Amazing.
NFL draft? The Jets have 4 picks in the top
The
38.
Northeast corridor, right? Like Philadelphia.
Oh, Philadelphia
too.
had
It's,
3
like,
first-round
crazy.
picks. The Giants were right there at what? Are
right.
they 5 and
They've
7? I
right.
believe.
So, like, I mean, yes, it's crazy. The Northeast corridor rules the draft. If everybody keeps their pick, like, I'm interested to see what all the wheeling and dealing that goes on.
Yeah, what do you think in terms? Everything's going to change. I know that. I'm not asking you.
Yeah.
Hey, are the Jets trading out of 4? Are they trading out of 10 or whatever? Things like that. Do you think 10 could be a landing spot for teams trying to get in front of other teams to get that first quarterback? I know this quarterback
Yeah,
class probably not
right.
going to rival past quarterback classes, but they typically go in the first round.
Yes, they do. They always seem to get pushed up
Yes.
for better or worse, sometimes for worse, but they do tend to get pushed up because teams are desperate. I am really curious to see how far they get pushed up this year because certainly the early returns on it are not great for
Right.
quarterbacks this year. And I do think so many teams need linemen. And if that's where the strength of this draft is, then then do teams hold on to their picks? Like it strikes me that a lot of teams, because there's so many good young quarterbacks, a lot of teams need offensive line help, for example. And so if that's what you need, like, do you find that value? Do they think deeper in the draft? So you trade back and accumulate picks? Interesting.
How about this with the Jets? Joe Douglas is taking offensive linemen in the first round in 2 consecutive drafts. If you go back to Mekhi Becton, Elijah Vera Tucker had an outstanding rookie year. You could be poised to take another offensive lineman at either 4 and 10 if you stay there. But you just mentioned too, the early talk of this draft class is it's got outstanding depth
Right.
at the edge position, and Robert Saleh cannot get enough
Right.
guys who can rush the passer.
Right. So what are they? I mean, that would seem to line up
Yeah.
well for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested to see. Like, I know people feel like, if it's not a quarterback driven draft, it's not a sexy draft. It's like, yeah, but these are the kinds of guys who make or break your team. Like, if you don't have linemen on both sides
Right.
of the ball, like, I mean, we've seen what happens, right?
But you're saying,
non-functional.
but Judy Batista is saying linemen and skill position players because you got to load up around the quarterback.
You got to load up around the quarterback.
Yeah.
Like, look at, I mean, again to the Bengals. Like, look at what Jamar Chase did for Joe Burrow. I mean, holy cow! They're not in the Super Bowl if you don't have that marriage.
It feels like not too long ago we were talking about what are the next steps after Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, and now here we are. This seems like another
Listen,
golden age of quarterbacks is upon us.
There was legitimate concern at the top levels of the league, like what happens when Brady and Peyton and Roethlisberger
And
Breeze
Yeah.
and eventually Aaron Rodgers. What happens when those guys retire? Those are the superstars of the game. Oh my gosh! And then I feel like it dissipated a little when Patrick Mahomes arrived.
Yeah.
But this year, I feel like this really felt like the passing of the torch, in part because Roethlisberger and Brady retired. Breeze was already retired. But then all of these young quarterbacks just completely blew up and are, it's not just Mahomes, right? I think we were waiting to see, who would challenge Mahomes, right? Like
Yeah.
there had to be somebody to provide competition. And now we see there's plenty of guys to provide competition.
There really is plenty of competition.
Mhm.
And hopefully, from a Jets fan perspective, Zach Wilson joins that mix. Should the San Francisco 49ers provide a model? If you're looking from a Jets perspective, Robert Saleh obviously came from Shanahan to San Francisco.
Mhm.
Like, is that the model what you want to be? I'm not saying Jimmy Garoppolo, but you're talking about a team who advanced to the Super Bowl, a couple years ago at a 10-point
Mhm.
lead over the
Mhm.
aforementioned Patrick Mahomes, and then this year
Mhm.
they had a fourth
awfully
quarter.
close.
They had a fourth quarter lead over the Rams in the NFC Championship game. You're talking about a 49ers team who very nearly
Mhm.
has appeared in 2 of the past 3 Super Bowls.
Yes, that's not bad. I would take that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just as far as system, you
and
like
what they are
LaFleur, what he's doing with
well,
Shanahan.
and what they're and this is not to I like Jimmy
Yeah.
Garoppolo, but right, like he's not Patrick Mahomes,
No.
right? Like he's not Joe Burrow. But they have so much else, right? They have the defense.
Yep.
I mean, obviously they have Deebo Samuel, who's like this unicorn, but yeah, I mean, if you could do that, I think you'd take that at the Jets or any other team, and it is not reliant on having, Patrick Mahomes
No.
or Joe Burrow.
No. I'm just saying is that you look at Salah
Mhm.
and you look where he came from, and you look at the offense Mike LaFleur is running, and that Kyle Shanahan attack, the way they get after people in the run game, play action, the boots, and then it's all predicated, as Salah continues to say, impacting the quarterback
Yeah, right.
with 4-man rushes. And nobody does that better probably in the league right now than San Francisco in terms of the numbers.
Right. Do you have those guys?
Well, Carl
That's what
Lawson,
you got it. Yes.
Carl Lawson would be
Right.
piece 1 on the
Right.
outside if he's
Right.
healthy.
Oh.
And then
Right.
you resign John Franklin Myers. You got Quinnen Williams there in the middle. You do have some pieces up
Yes.
front. And you do have pieces along the offensive line, to be honest with you.
And you've got capital.
Yes.
I
So-
like it.
So, okay.
We can get behind that.
An interesting off season ahead. Judy,
Yes.
we will see you in a few weeks down in warmer temperatures
It's not
down
that
there in
bad
Florida.
here in Indianapolis today.
Oh.
It's like in the 60s.
Uh,
We can't complain about
Yeah,
that.
but the sun's dropping here soon. It's going to be cold.
Oh my gosh, you are so spoiled. Are you kidding?
Thank-
Like, this is the best weather we've had in Indianapolis ever.
You're right. Thanks, Judy.
Good to see you.